Hello YouTube! Today we're going to be talking about editing with RAW files. So, what is a RAW file? Well, first of all, there's no distinguishable RAW file. It's not .raw necessarily. There might be a .raw, but that's not what all RAW files are. Essentially what a RAW file is basically a type of file, and this counts for many different things, not just cameras or video cameras. It's basically just all the data that comes out of a device. So, in this case, we're talking about cameras, particularly image cameras like photography cameras. In this case, I'm using a Nikon camera. So, what it creates is a type of RAW format called .nef. Now, first of all, most and biggest and foremost, when you get your first Nikon DSLR, if you choose to, this is almost identical to Canon. Sadly, I don't personally own a Canon to show you how to do it, or else, trust me, I would have both of the file formats with me right now to show you. I'm not personally a Nikon fanboy or Canon, so that's not really the problem right now. Anyway, so first of all, sadly, if you just got your camera and you shot RAW, you put your SD card in the reader, you're not going to be getting, in this case, this is a RAW file. You're not going to be able to see it like this. You won't be able to open it like this. Sadly, Windows is too stupid to know how to do that. What you need to do, because of the stupidity of Windows, and I'm not saying OS X is better, it's just a fact. You have to go to this, which is Nikon's website. It doesn't look like it, but it is. And you get this file, and essentially what this file does is allows you to support, or allows you to edit and view, or not edit, but you're able to view, and Windows recognizes NEF files, essentially. So it's a quick install. You don't have to pay or anything for it. It's directly from Nikon, so it's not a virus necessarily, unless if Nikon, because Nikon's a big virus vendor. I'm kidding, of course. So just install that, and you'll get to see them like they were any other image format. So once that's done, you'll be able to see them. Now, the biggest comparison between RAW files and, let's say, JPEGs is that they're a lot bigger, about twice as big. So this is a RAW file. You can see the .nef, and this is a JPEG, the .jpeg, and you'll notice that it's 4.62 megabytes. Well, this is 8 megabytes. So you see the big difference? So on top of that, they're harder to edit because they're slower to load, and not every editor will technically work with them. But the biggest and most important editors that most people use are Lightroom and Photoshop. That might be different. You might have a different editor, but most of the big editors will use them. Things like Paint, Microsoft Paint, and crap like that. Mind my language. I don't think anybody really supports Microsoft Paint as a editing software for photos, but things like that won't work with .nef. So once you got your image, you can do this. You can go to Edit with Photoshop. In this case, we're using CS6, or you can just drag it over. So here we see we have Photoshop open. I always have Photoshop open with a few images. As you can tell, I'm doing a photo shoot with this building. And that's also a RAW file as well, by the way. You can see .nef. If we go back to the images, we can just drag. Now, something to note is if you have an image open like this, don't drag and drop it in where this box is when you see highlights, because that's going to place the image on top of that image. You're going to want to open up a whole new thing, so you can drop it anywhere else, really, just not in the box. So, like for instance here, doesn't really matter. And there you go. So biggest thing you're going to notice is that you get this screen. You've never seen the screen before if you use JPEGs, because JPEGs don't have the options that RAW files do. So this will allow you to edit almost all of the settings that you would have been, that the camera itself and its computer and all that would have been editing for you. Even if you're in manual mode, a lot of these settings are actually still automatic. So, for instance, we can change the exposure. This is not the same exposure as in your camera. I don't know how to explain it. And you can edit your contrast, which is actually different than the contrast you get. I can't touch that. But you know, in Photoshop, it's different. And you get these settings, clarity, which is really useful. It really allows you to do really cool things with your images. So in this case of a building, kind of looks it could do with a lot more detail and a lot more grit. Well, you can do that by adding more clarity to it. And now you can see, if I added 100% clarity, that the building has a lot more grit and detail. Now, you can also, the opposite is very useful. A good example of that is if you're shooting a person, such as this person. When you're doing portrait photography, a big issue is that if you get tactile sharp, you can get their pores and any imperfections, and those don't look lovely. People don't like looking at pores and imperfections. Now, it's not saying the model in the photo is not good at doing her face and makeup. She is. It's just cameras can be very sharp sometimes. So if you do the opposite, you can make it so it doesn't look fake, but you can really smooth out like the face details without making them not look sharp. And that will allow the images just to look better. And to do that, you just do the opposite of what I just did here. So you just do the opposite. So you can tell in this it doesn't really help the image at all, but that's just an example. Now I'll show you some of the settings I probably would have done in this image. So if we go out, we're gonna. So just a minute. Okay, so generally I like to zoom up and see three things. So I see this metal thing, the sky, and the windows. That'll allow me to understand how the various aspects are doing. So we're going to add a lot of clarity, which is going to make the image darker. That's okay for now. We're going to make the image look really bad and then make it look good again, which is kind of hard to explain. So, see, does not look realistic, but you bring this down to saturation and it starts looking a little bit more realistic again. And what that will do is allow you to have more richer colors in your glass, generally, and in leaves and other things. It's just generally a thing I do. And once you're done that, you can edit things like the shadows. You can bring them up a little bit for that windowsill if you want. Probably not going to touch that because it's going to affect a lot of things. Bring the blacks a tiny bit up. See how the image looks. Always look at the entire image, because you might be thinking you're only editing that, but then you make something over there look really bad. So when you're done that, we can I think that's pretty good. I might make it a little darker. So there we go. So there's the edited image. Now, something to note, none of those edits were the same kind of edits that Photoshop does now. You can go in there. It's not these type of edits. The difference is that the edits I just did don't affect the actual quality of the image. What they do affect is the just the aesthetics. Mostly it's hard to explain, but when you do edits in here, such as black and white, that actually decreases the quality of JPEGs. And this image won't be affected, but if you use a JPEG, it will actually affect the quality of it. So we're done here, and we can save it. Control S or Control Shift S for save as. We can call that one we can just replace this one. It's exactly the same. I tried making this video first time and failed. So okay, we have three images here. This one's edited using RAW file, This one's a regular old JPEG camera that's not edited, because remember, this image isn't edited using Photoshop. It's the raw file that's been manually edited. So first of all, let's have a look at this JPEG image. So as you can tell, it's very flat. You don't have too much detail or anything. It's a very flat image. And I could have changed that by changing settings in the camera. But in the end of the day, if I made a wrong setting, I could never fix that. While when I use the raw file, which by itself looks exactly the same, it looks pale. Raw just doesn't look that particularly nice. But because it's raw, it gave me the options to make it look like this kind of, which some people might not like it. I personally like it a lot. There's also options to do noise reduction. There's a bit of noise in that, quite a bit. But this is not necessarily an image I would use. It's just a good example. So, as you can tell, a lot of the details that you'd like to use in an abandoned building like this, like all this weathering, and the glass, and the wood, and the metal, the rust, and whatever else, you get a lot. It stands out a lot more. Anyway, that's about it. I just wanted to show you why use RAW, basically. Why would you use RAW? And if you have any questions about RAW, if you want me to really show you how to do a Canon one, I will do a Canon one as well. But I just don't have a Canon camera, so I'll have to find a RAW file online and then edit it for you guys. Anyway, that's it. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please press the like button. It makes me feel happy when people press the like button. And if you have any questions, I think I already said this, just ask away in the comment section. I'll answer them as fast as I can. If you have any extended message questions that can't be answered in a quick comment, just message me. I'll try my best to answer them. And that's about it. Have a great day.